Have you ever felt overwhelmed with all that's going on in the world? Sometimes we don't realize that we can make a difference. My name is Debbie Van Grieken, and it is my hope to inspire you to take small steps towards social impact. Join us each week as we have conversations with those who have taken simple steps towards living a more sustainable and socially conscious lifestyle. If you want to make social impact, let's start small. The Small Steps podcast is proudly sponsored by Moya Shea Products. As a listener, enjoy 15% off your online purchase. Use code SMALLSTEPS15 at checkout. At Moya, we believe in people helping people. Supporting the local and global communities that help our organization succeed is very important to us. We apply a fair trade framework when purchasing raw materials, supporting farmers and families. Thinking global and acting local, Moya works with organizations to better the lives of children through education and fair trade. Are you looking for the best moisturizer for beautiful, healthy, glowing skin? Our Shea products are superb moisturizers and have exceptional healing properties for those suffering from skin issues. Check out these products and our wellness line at moyasheabutter.com. We're thrilled to be joined by Leah Feor today. Leah is a resident of Crystal Beach in the town of Fort Erie, right here in Ontario, Canada. Leah holds an undergraduate degree in commerce with specialization in accounting from the Tefler School of Management at the University of Ottawa, and has a graduate certificate in environmental management and assessment from Niagara College. Currently, Leah is completing the Masters of Environment and Business, the MEB program, from the University of Waterloo, and is undertaking research in the field of sustainable finance. Prior to joining the faculty at Niagara College, Leah traveled extensively throughout Latin America, which inspired her to found Simply Sustainable, a social enterprise dedicated to fair trade and sustainable business practices. Leah uses her experiences in the classroom, where she delivers courses in accounting, CSR, entrepreneurship, and organizational sustainability. She also serves as a board member of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and is committed to initiatives that build community resilience. Thanks for joining me today, Leah.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Good to be here.
We've known each other for a long time now. I really wanted to introduce you to our listeners because you were so instrumental in helping me create my mission and implement sustainable practices right at the beginning of my business, Moya Shea Products. That was back in 2016. Can you believe it's been 4 years already?
Time does fly.
It really does. We heard in your bio that you've done some extensive traveling. We both have that in common. And that was part of your inspiration. But could you really share with us what led you into the field of sustainability?
For sure, yeah. Obviously, travel did have a lot to do with that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I'll say that my interest in environmental and social responsibility, it started to grow when I was in university in the early 2000s. So I was specializing in accounting through a school of business. So there was little room for me to explore topics in the field of sustainability within my program. Luckily, in my fourth year, I did have the chance to work on an environmental auditing project. And from there, I was hooked. Since done my best to explore many facets of sustainability, but have long been interested in how we can better manage our environmental impact and our societal impact from a business perspective. So following university and after some time working as a financial auditor, I actually returned to school to complete a graduate certificate in environmental management and assessment from Niagara College. And that sent me in a whole new direction, south to be specific. I had a couple of students that were in classes with me that were from Latin America. And so my feet started to get pretty itchy, and I put on a backpack and I began traveling throughout Latin America and observe different environmental and social issues when spending time in different communities. Most of them were rural communities. My time abroad really changed me. It changed my perspective. So I consider myself to be a global citizen, one that recognizes that we are one big community. And what we do in Niagara, for example, can have a negative impact around the globe. Climate change, for example, impacts vulnerable communities that likely have small environmental footprints. Another big change in my mindset, shifting back into me as a business student and as a business professional, it's from thinking about shareholders to stakeholders. companies need to consider more than their investors. They need to also think about their employees and suppliers, customers, and the community at large. And of course, thinking about the planet and how we manage our natural resources.
That's great. I absolutely love that global citizen. It's such an awesome phrase because we really are. We're global citizens and we need to think about these things. And it's so interesting how you've kind of come full circle. You started off with the accounting and actually was able to bring your passion back into your work, which is that's just so amazing. I think that's awesome.
I've rounded a lot of circles. I mean, I have the great pleasure of teaching into the very program that I did at Niagara College. So I teach students in the environmental management and assessment program, and I teach them organizational sustainability. So that's really an honor for me to be able to give back in that way, and to use the knowledge that I've gained over the years and contribute in the classroom. And also in my own personal studies, I'm completing my master's right now in environment and business. And I do put a lot of focus in the field of sustainable finance. So I have found a way to stay true to my first love, which was accounting, and be able to pair it in a meaningful way with my passion and commitment to environmental and social responsibility.
That's so amazing. I just love that you're able to give back in that way too, what you've been given as well. So that's so great. Leah, the topic of sustainability is so complex. Why is it important for our listeners to try and understand the role they play?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The topic is quite complex. And I would say part of what makes it so complex is that not everyone defines it in the same way. So we can hear sustainable paired up with all these different words, or sustainability paired up with all these different words, and it can take on different meanings. When I think about sustainability, I consider it as a goal that is to be achieved through sustainable development. And that was defined originally by the World Commission on Environment and Development through something called the Brundtland Report. And it's defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Today, we have the Sustainable Development Goals to guide us. So the United Nations in 2015 issued a series of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And if we look at those goals and the targets within each of those goals, which are meant to be achieved by 2030 on a global scale, we can surely see where we can contribute, either as a business or as an individual. So sustainability is multidimensional. We are looking to balance environmental, social, and economic performance and impact. There will always be trade-offs, but for those that are dedicated to meaningful change, they will work through the trade-offs by engaging with their stakeholders, for example. So that's obviously from the business perspective. From an individual perspective, I often get engaged in conversations with my students where, they'll tell me something that they did on the weekend. They'll say, I had a campfire. And they're like, oh no, I was, carbon emissions. And I says, well, the campfire though, what it allowed you to do was, have a social gathering and maybe contribute to your own well-being because it's something that is a bit of a ritual for you, or it relaxes you. So we have to think, and that's what I mean by trade-offs. We have to think that sometimes we are going to make a bit of a negative impact in one area because we're making a positive impact in the other area. However, to really achieve sustainability, we need to find a way to limit those trade-offs and really seek out those triple wins, if you will.
Right. So finding a balance, but actually, really still working towards those goals. I think it's important that I put in the show notes a link to the sustainable goals because they are really important. And there's a nice chart. It's quite a nice visual effect that we can link you to that so that our listeners can to see all of those goals put out in place, which I think is important.
Yeah, and I have a couple of other mentions that I do throughout that I'll do throughout the talk, and I could share with you links for those as well. It is good, takeaway for your listeners. But also to your last question, I wanted to speak more to individuals. They play an important role, mainly because we're so interconnected. So there's that ripple effect from our actions. If we stop rewarding massive unsustainable corporations by no longer buying their products, for example, they'll be forced to adapt toward more sustainable business practices or become obsolete. Another thing that's important to recognize is that we live within planetary boundaries and we must exist within them. Unfortunately, we have been borrowing from the future for a while now. Earth Overshoot Day, which marks the day that as a global society, we use up all the resources for 1 year. it was delayed by about 3 weeks this year due to COVID and the shutdowns happening around the world. Goes to show you, if we drive less, consume less, our environmental footprint will shrink. Unfortunately, it was as a result of a global pandemic that has caused a lot of negative impact around the world, but it does demonstrate that if we shift our consumption behaviors, we can actually make a more positive impact on the planet. Sad to say, less of a bad impact, because obviously if we're Earth Overshoot Day on a global scale was in August this year, last year it was in July, so there was about a 3-week difference. However, if we look at Canada, Canada lands in about March. So by March of 2020, for example, we used up all of our Earth's capacity for 1 year. We're seriously borrowing from the future, and that's a clear indication of that is how large our environmental footprint is due to the way that we, not only the way that we consume, but also the way that we change land use. So we see new neighborhoods popping up. What does that mean? That means greater consumption, bigger homes, more energy use, but it also means the clear cutting of forests.
Agricultural land as well. We're not, we're clearing the agricultural land to make way for the houses, and yeah.
Yeah, and we look at why is it important to have a forest? Because it sequesters carbon, right? It absorbs the carbon from the atmosphere, and that's what we need. So when we cut that down to put up something that releases carbon into the atmosphere, we're doing a double bad there. So we need to be really mindful of how we're consuming and how we're developing. So I do encourage your listeners to visit the Global Footprint Network's website and calculate their own individual ecological footprint and learn more about how they can decrease it.
That's a great segue into my next question. I'm actually feeling that a lot of people get overwhelmed. I think what you were just talking about, though, was showing that, we have seen some changes. We have seen some positives come out, unfortunately, of COVID, but we have seen the clearing of the air. We've seen, some positive things happening. But, I really don't want people to get too overwhelmed, which I think is what happens, because that just leads to inaction, and that's not going to help anybody. So if you could share with us a few simple things that you've implemented in your own daily routine that we could maybe adopt or, try out, and we know that these are going to have some big impacts.
You're absolutely right. We can become overwhelmed when we think about how big these issues are that we're facing on a global scale, and maybe how small our impact might feel. But once we get into the habit of it, and, once you start doing it naturally and people around you start to see it, they get inspired by it. And again, that ripple effect, behavior change. But I'll say, I think it's safe to say that driving less is one of the most impactful actions that someone can take. Not always easy, considering some of the areas that we live in. I know, for example, I live a 74-kilometer round trip from my work, which means that, when I was going in every day, that's a pretty big footprint.
We're actually in a position too where my husband has been working from home part of the days and only having to commute a couple of days a week. So we made the conscious decision that we were going to give up one vehicle so that we could share a vehicle. We're fortunate, we're privileged enough to own a Prius. So, we have the hybrid, which helps as well. So we're trying to just, reduce that footprint by going down to one vehicle. So, just again, those small things can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. So leaving your car at home more often and choosing alternative modes of transportation, which include active transportation, that can have a real positive impact on your health and well-being. Getting out and going for walks or riding your bike obviously is good for I say this from personal experience. It's good for my health, and it's good for both my physical and my mental health, my well-being. I also believe that the more time that we spend outdoors, the more time that we spend in nature, the more likely we are to be good stewards of the environment. And I think that's really important. And I think I often think of the list that I made on my website many years ago, which were 101 simple acts for sustainable impact. And at the very top of the list was connect with nature. Once we form a connection with nature, and with the environment and with the planet, we're more likely to be stewards, and we're more likely to safeguard it because it's really valuable to us. That's all well and fine. And I think a lot of us, we do get in the habit of getting out for walks and riding our bike when we can and getting out for hikes and being in nature. But sometimes it's our consumption that has that negative impact. So we have to change those behaviors as well. So some simple things that I changed many years ago was I shifted my consumption patterns. I consumed less, which is important. And when I did make purchases, I aimed for products that were fair trade, organic, and built to last. So it may be more expensive, but we need to consider that value is not only captured in economic measures.
Right. So it's buying less, but it's buying better.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we have to consider when we are picking up something to purchase it, do we need it? Will it add value to my life? And what are the impacts of me purchasing this versus not? And I realize that when we're standing in a store, we might not have that inner dialogue, but perhaps when people are online shopping, they now have it, at their disposal, a lot more companies to buy from. Maybe they'll consider going to smaller businesses, and same goes for folks that are looking to get out shopping. Instead of going to the shopping mall, consider going to your main street or your downtown and see small boutiques that you can support and buy unique and good quality products from.
That's wonderful. I agree 100%. Educating businesses and change makers like you do, you must find that there's a lot of bigger challenges. And how do you help them work through it? Because I know as a business owner myself, we have a lot of struggles. There's issues around waste, packaging, supply chains. How do you help them out?
Well, I think it's important that people can acknowledge that one person, one business can make a difference, even if it's in their own world for the time being. Like I said, that when we do better, we may inspire people around us to do better as well, and that ripple effect can really have a large impact. But I also I try to challenge them to think differently, think of the bigger picture. Think of your ultimate goal. Sustainability can be very challenging if you are chipping away at it in a really fragmented way, because then you don't see momentum. What you want to do is be able to see the big picture and find different leverage points within that, so that you can when you're making a decision, it doesn't just have one positive outcome to it. It has multiple positive outcomes to it. And it's also important to recognize that it's a long road. And sometimes it's a lonely road. That doesn't mean that it's not worth walking and not worth committing to. And I'll go back to that, is that it is a mindset thing, and understanding what is your goal? What is the big picture here for you? If you as a business want to jump on the sustainability train because you think it's going to get you better sales, that's going to pose a lot of challenges because your heart is likely not in it.
You're not aligned. Your values aren't aligned with your actions, and that's
absolutely.
It's so important. And I think people are starting to catch on to that in marketing and, the famous greenwashing and things like that. I think consumers are getting a lot smarter around that. We always try to talk about the triple bottom line, putting people and planet ahead of profit. So we're making those decisions, obviously, profit, sustainability, we need that, but we're not going to sacrifice other decisions, if it's going to affect people or our planet. So you have to really look at all of that. So I think it's really important. So thanks for touching on that.
Well, and it's interesting. And I know that we've long had this conversation about people and planet before profit. And I think that if we look at it as environment, economy, and society, and we look at what economy is not just making money. Economy is about jobs. Economy is about distribution of wealth. Economy is about a sustainable society that has the government has money in the coffer to be able to support different social programs that it does, because people are paying their taxes, and people are paying their taxes because they have work and they get good wages. So if we look at it beyond profit profit can be such a dirty word because we think about the shareholders. But if we think about economy from the stakeholders' perspective, that's when we begin to realize that balancing of the three is so integral. And economics is not just about, making money. It's about how we make the money. And I'll touch upon it, I'm sure, at another point in our conversation. But when we can think about economy from a circular circular economy perspective and a new economy and a green economy perspective, we want that economy to be thriving alongside people and planet, alongside environment and society. So how can we look at those three dimensions on the same level in a sense? And that's by shifting our understanding of what profit actually means or what economy actually means. It doesn't have to be a dirty word.
Right. That's excellent. It's a great way of looking at it. COVID came and kind of threw us all off balance here a bit. So a lot of businesses are having to pivot. So how do you pivot without compromising these values around sustainability? Do you have any quick tips for some of the small businesses out there, and what maybe some of our listeners can be asking companies, how they're dealing with that?
Okay, so I'll try my best to answer that one. I'll say that it's important to remember that when a company values sustainability, it is built into their business rather than bolted on. And I know you're familiar with that terminology when we talk about social entrepreneurship and social impact. Sustainability, it needs to be approached from a strategic perspective. If we genuinely want sustainability to be integral to the business model, it needs to be from a strategic perspective. And through communication, stakeholders can be informed about this strategy and its timeline. I think that there's some responsibility that needs to shift to the customers, that they cannot have things overnight. So it is not easy for companies to adopt 100% sustainable business practices overnight, especially not in the middle of a global crisis, right? So not only does it take time, years even, there needs to be internal and external infrastructure in place to support the transition. So it's not fair when customers look at a business and say, well, your packaging isn't sustainable, because sustainable packaging is not mainstream right now. There's just not enough of it. I'll dive a little bit deeper in that, but small businesses, they have the advantage that they can be more agile and therefore pivot more quickly. However, they're also, small businesses can often have less resources available to them. So the pivots need to be well thought out and cost effective because they don't have as much room for error. I'd like to shift into, using Moya as an example for this question. And part of it is because I was with you in the early stages, and I was with you when you were facing those challenges of packaging. And I remember having that conversation with you and saying, it's a real bummer when people criticize you for that. One of the few things about your business that isn't in the true nature of sustainability, which is obviously your jars. And I was frustrated by it because I thought all the other great things that you're doing, and they can't see the forest for the trees. All they can see is that one thing that isn't good. And it is quite frustrating. So I'd like to say that customers, they need to be aware that challenges around packaging, it needs to be tackled from multiple angles, and it's not always from just the store that's selling the product to you. So it's not always within the one company's control.
Just to give some of our listeners some background on that, we started off in black plastic jars. And then when we discovered that some areas were not recycling the black plastic, we made the decision to switch out of the plastic, and we went into a glass jar. Obviously, we wanted to make that switch. We made the switch. We're happy we made that switch. But there's issues around sustainability with glass. So, sometimes I feel like we can't win because, there's glass has its own unique issues as far as, it takes more resources to manufacture it. It's heavier, therefore it costs more to ship, and there's breakage, and are people actually recycling them? So, we have a whole bunch of issues there, but these are things that consumers need to learn about, and they need to understand, and they need to talk with the businesses that they're buying from, and really understand what goes into those decisions. And I think it's really important.
It absolutely is, and you are right that with respect to the glass jars, it's it obviously has some other maybe more significant environmental impacts, and the weight of them being one of them in the transportation. But it is an alternative nonetheless, and it is going to come back to how the customer disposes of it at the end of life. So the customer holds responsibility within the way that they consume and the way that they make use of the product at the end of life. I know myself, when I use Moya shea butter, I no longer buy individual jars of it because I use so much of it that I shifted to buying it in bulk. And I do that for different products. But just getting back to that point of of trying to inform customers, consumers, what it actually involves when we're looking at something as like packaging. So I wanted to bring up 3 points here, and that's one is that alternative packaging needs to exist in the broader market. While you did find some options, as an alternative to that original black jar, sometimes it compromised the overall quality of the product experience. And some jars would leak, for example, which are obviously not ideal for shipping or when the product is being used by the customer. And until more packaging companies invest in a more sustainable product line, businesses like Moya will not have sufficient options to use for their own product line. And that brings me to the customers. The customers need to demand it more and be willing to pay a premium for it. And that goes for both on an individual retailer perspective, so your customers, but also wholesale customers for the packaging companies, which means that more companies like Moya need to push their suppliers to innovate and develop more responsible packaging. And that leads me to my next point is that businesses need to develop relationships with their suppliers to support the transition to sustainable production. Circular economy, which I mentioned earlier, it's a term that is becoming more popular. The Government of Canada defines it as a new way of doing business that extracts as much value as possible from resources by recycling, repairing, reusing, repurposing, or refurbishing products and materials, eliminating waste and greenhouse gas emissions at the design stage. To that, businesses of all sizes, they need to leverage the transition to a circular economy by collaborating on research and innovations, and in some cases, taking advantage of funding opportunities presented to advance circular production.
That's amazing. Yeah, I just feel like already so much better just listening to how, this is all going about, and we are able to have a say in this. If we can get a few more people on board, we all start talking, we all start, using our voice, we can really see some differences. And that's what it's all about.
Sorry, not to interrupt you there, but to that point, a new way, when we look at, we're doing business differently in so many ways. And one of those really significant ways is we have to look at it as collaboration, not competition. And while, yes, competition will always exist in the business world, by coming together and multiple voices coming together and collaborating, you think about industry associations, for example, their voice is magnified by speaking together to these issues. And so it is really important that when we are trying to make these really big systemic changes, we need to recognize that we can't do it alone. So we need to find different groups to collaborate with and different groups to connect with so that our voices can be heard louder.
That's great advice. Absolutely. As we finish up here, we're heading into the holiday season. We've already talked about buying less, but buying better. I'm wondering if you have any ethical product swaps or any tips or advice that you can give our listeners as they head into the holiday shopping season of what they can maybe be looking for.
It's no surprise here, but shop local every chance you get, even if it's as simple as getting a gift card for somebody. We want to keep money as close to home as possible, especially during these challenging times. So while your favorite restaurant might not be open for dine-in, they are probably open for takeout, and buying a gift card from them and giving that as a gift is actually a really nice gift for those that receive it. And it doesn't have a significant negative impact on the environment because people are more likely to go there anyways. So instead of buying them some random gift that they might not use, that might just end up in sad to say, a junk drawer or maybe even disposed of, buy them something that they know that they'll use. My dad, I don't know how many years he's been saying this for, but you ask him, what do you want for your birthday? Consumables. What do you want for Father's Day? Consumables. Exactly. So we've learned this, you buy him his favorite foods, you buy him favorite beer, things like that. You buy him gift certificates to his favorite restaurant and he's happy. You buy him a pair of pants, he returns them. So, understanding who you're buying for and why you want to give them a gift and really reflecting on those things, that is important so that we can produce less waste by buying things just for the sake of buying them or just to have presents under the tree. You can also consider making donations to organizations that support the environment and society. That's
a great one too. Yeah.
Plant a few trees.
Yeah. And a lot of times people are looking to get people gifts that the people have everything they need. So those are a really good option, something that you're honoring them by maybe one of their favorite organizations or charities and can donate in their name. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned something about product swaps. as you know, I'm a big fan of Moya Shea Butter, and it's probably because I was there from the very beginning, and I got to try it all the time when we were working together, and I really enjoy it. It's one of the few personal care products that I use. But when it comes to soap, for example, while I do have a couple of bars of Moya soap, and I enjoy it, and I'm using your favorite scent right now. Typically, what I do is I buy a gallon of Dr. Bronner's Pure Castile soap, which is biodegradable. And anybody at home that hasn't heard of Dr. Bronner's yet, please go and visit their website, because they're an inspiration when it comes to doing business better. They have an amazing business model. They've stayed true to their roots all along the way, and they're making an incredible positive impact in the communities where they operate. And so Dr. Bronner's by far is, alongside Moya, they're my two top brands that I buy in bulk.
We actually have some recipes that we share on our website, and making your own products, and definitely using Dr. Bronner's as a base added with some of our ingredients is an amazing combination. We love them as well. They're fair trade. They're ethical. It's a wonderful company.
Yeah. And also, because I buy it by the gallon, I'm not going into a store as often where I'm looking for these products, right? Because I'll say, buying in bulk, it's a great way to reduce packaging, but also the number of times that I go shopping. So less time I spend in stores often equals less consumption.
And less travel to those stores, everything.
Yeah.
Impact, right?
Absolutely. But when it comes to food, I'm going to say that the easiest things for me to swap out, and I did this years ago, was my bananas. I only buy organic bananas. And when it comes to coffee, it's only fair trade coffee. You pay a little bit more, but you also get a lot more value. And having spent time in communities in Latin America where, bananas and delicious coffee comes from, I recognize the importance of paying more to ensure that farmers get better wages and better working environments, and that we treat the planet with more kindness. So it's money well spent. It's an investment in communities and in our planet. I
would definitely add my favorite swap there is the fair trade chocolate. You gotta have a little
that too.
Well, thanks so much, Leah, for generously sharing your time with us today. We've learned so much. And I think the important takeaways from this too is that it's not that overwhelming. If we take these small steps together, we can make a huge impact. And so I want to thank you so much again for sharing your time. If you'd like to just tell us how people can connect with you, if they have any other questions or if they want to follow along with what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure to talk about this stuff. And I am happy to share more insights. I frequent Twitter. I am passionate. That's what most people will say about me. But as for platforms of choice, Twitter is number one for me. I spend that's the social media site that I spend most of my time on, and you'll find that I'm typically sharing information about sustainable development, about conservation, and local social entrepreneurship, for example. So people can just look up my full name, Leah Feor, on Twitter. They can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn under the same name. So those are the top two ways to get in touch with me. And if they can't find me that way, then I'm sure they wouldn't mind reaching out to you and just saying, hey, can you put me in contact? Because that I know that you'd be more than happy to forward any of those requests.
Absolutely. We would do that. Well, thanks again so much, Leah. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Start Small. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found a small step you can take today. Make sure you share it with a friend. And if you have not done so yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you are enjoying this podcast, consider taking a moment and leaving us an honest review in your Apple podcasting app so more people can be inspired to take small steps towards social impact.